welcome to another episode of The Bandwagon Fan. This is the show where we talk about all things pop culture and what we're into right now. I'm Josh.
And I'm Alex.
Today, we're super excited to have a special guest with us. He's worked in the comic industry on titles like Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, Black Canary, Paper Girls, and Catwoman, Lonely City. Folks, Cliff Chiang.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you taking your time to chat with us a little bit about your work.
Well, now that I'm done with Catwoman, I have some free time, so so happy to talk with you guys.
Love it. Let's take a journey back in time. I know some of the stories you've worked on have dealt with time travel and whatnot. What was the moment? I love hearing like where creators come from. Not necessarily like they're like, where you're born, but like, what's your journey like? We've talked to a few other creators, and it's really cool to see the different paths people take. So what was the moment for you that you decided you wanted to work in the comic industry?
I think it was in college. I wanted to do some sort of storytelling and got into filmmaking. And just in like my first year, class of filmmaking, I was shooting something and the light meter was miscalibrated and all my footage came back like way too dark. And I was like, this sucks. Like this is the worst because like, you spend all this time, I'm capturing something for like a documentary. I can't go back and get it again. I can't do a reshoot on any of this. And I was like, this is awful. But if I want to tell stories, I can draw maybe, and I was getting back into comics because, that's when Sandman was coming out and Garth and Steve Dillon on Hellblazer. I was getting back into comics and stuff that was kind of more adult. And I just thought, maybe that's where I should focus. And, it ended up being, like kind of fits and starts, but basically kind of worked my way into comics in editorial while I was working on my art skills because I wasn't good enough. And, the competition was really high to break in as an artist. So I spent a couple of years in editorial as I was working and learning what, makes a good page of comics. So after I left editorial, I went completely freelance, didn't have a lot of work, but was able to kind of pick and choose, short things to work on as opposed to just trying to make ends meet and take anything that came along. It's really, I think, tricky at the beginning when you don't have a lot of credits to your name and then you do one thing and then people want 10 more of those things. So it's like, it's easy to kind of get pigeonholed and, and with my style, which was a little bit kind of a little retro, I think, for the time. Then I was getting a lot more period stuff, but then I would do something with crime and then I'd get more crime stuff. And so it kind of would go in a bunch of different directions. And, but it was good to kind of branch out as much as I could and try as many different things as was available to me.
Yeah. Was it hard to break out of that then?
I don't know how much of it was like up to me or up to, the editors, I think it was important to me to make sure that whatever my portfolio was, that it had a good smattering of like, some superhero stuff, some real world stuff, just so that, my interests as a reader are all over the place, and I want to be able to do any kind of story as long as it's a good one. But I didn't want to be, for someone to say, oh, he's not right for that, those conversations may have happened. I just didn't know about them.
Yeah,
right.
No, it's interesting.
So what was the moment where you felt in your career, like I'm my own artist, like people know who I am. You're not like being pigeonholed into a box. Like, what was the moment we were like, hey, I'm doing this?
I actually think it was Paper Girls. I spent a long time at DC. I was exclusive there for 10 years, I think. And, worked on a whole bunch of different projects, but I never really knew kind of where I stood because, you work on, on something and like, are people there because they're just fans of that character? You have no idea. But working on Wonder Woman really expanded like my reach. A lot more people saw my work than had seen it before. And going from that to Paper Girls was when, it was really kind of nerve wracking because I wasn't sure if people were going to follow me at all, but knowing that, that people did check out Paper Girls, was, I don't know, gives me some confidence, I guess, that like there's people know who I am and they know what my work is like, and that, and that it's interesting to them, and that they will, follow to something that's not superheroes.
Yeah, like I don't know if people realize like that's a pretty big leap. Like to you looking back, like do you feel like you were taking a big risk with your career by like making the jump out of DC?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely nervous about it. But then again, it's like a creator-owned book with Brian K. Vaughan is not,
Yeah, that's true.
it's not really rolling the dice. But what I appreciate is that, Brian still takes risks, like, so, we did a book about 4 12-year-old girls, time traveling, and that's not necessarily what people would have expected from us, and certainly something that felt wasn't like in the marketplace and wasn't the kind of stories that were being told. So
Yeah, it even
Yeah,
feels different from Brian Vaughn's previous work. I mean, I think Saga had only been out for a couple of years at that point, and it feels unique having this discussion because I feel like I was always aware of like superhero comics, but I was one of those people that got really into the comic world because of comics like Image and Saga, and eventually like Paper Girls and similar things from that. So like I think it feels really unique and special seeing you like jump from like the world of DC to Image that was much smaller, especially in 2015. I believe that was around the time.
yeah, it's. I mean, I always wanted to tell stories. I didn't necessarily want to just do superhero stuff, and I think that has allowed me to try more things. If my goal was only to draw Spider-Man or something like that, then like that's that's a goal where you're putting that in. You're putting someone else in charge of whether they let you do that. But if your goal is to just tell stories, then you can find a way to do it.
yeah, and what's really cool is like outside of the superhero genre, like there's so much possibility,
Yeah.
and sometimes you it becomes more of a niche audience that you're working with, but in the age of IP adaptations, you kind of see the range and the spectrum being broadened. There's pros and cons to that, and to talk about the brutally murdered elephant in the room, Paper Girls was obviously the way that turned out. We talked about it on the show. Very very disappointed. Actually, the news broke like right before we were gonna be talking about the show.
Was it a very
So
somber show? Everyone was like wearing
it,
black, and.
Yeah,
actually, it was a very angry show. We were very upset. Um,
Thank
and, and
you.
and we you keep seeing this trend where a big company acquires the rights, they're gonna create something, and then they cancel it, and what sucks is that it doesn't give an audience the time to invest into something, and it doesn't give the creators, the people attached to that project, the ability to create something long lasting. What's your take on this? Because we talked about it. We're not happy.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly it was incredibly disappointing to me. But I think what we're seeing really is kind of a symptom of the evolution of streaming. The model of binging, works for certain things, but we have decades of experience with network TV. Like it takes time to build stuff, and then when you do let something grow, you can have, a series that, kind of defies expectations, becomes a hit, and but expecting people to just jump on and watch, 8 10 episodes of something in one weekend and then decide whether that's, um, a hit or not that's a big commitment. I don't know if I'd ask anybody. I mean, as it was, I was, telling everybody I know to check out Paper Girls when it launched, but it's a big ask to have someone sit down for like 10 hours and just so that your show doesn't get canceled. So I think we as a culture, as an industry, are kind of working our way through this. Like, does it keep working? And then you see places like Netflix, experimenting more with dropping episode by episode, or like Disney Plus, doing an episode or two a week. And it just gives a chance for more people to check it out, and for more people to talk about it and kind of
Totally.
control the conversation. So, I think, I wish we had a second season of Paper Girls. I think what they did was really great. The show creators, and the cast, the crew, they really made something really special, and I think would have only grown in the second season.
Yeah,
But
I totally agree. I feel like one thing with the show that I was actually nervous about before it came out was it was like your art is so specific, and there's so much happening in that series, like on a panel, that I was a little worried that it wasn't going to be able to like carry over the same. But I feel like they did really well with like having it feel like the comic, but also standalone enough that it's like still kind of its own thing. But yeah, like the show, the comic, we were like both very impressed with it. But I wish more networks would give like a second season a chance, because like I'm one of those slow people where like it takes me months and months to like finish a show. I have the last episode of Rings of Power, which like it's been like what 2 or 3 weeks at this point. But like, people just sometimes just run out of time, and it feels unrealistic to like have a show go viral and become like the most popular thing within 2 weeks of release.
yeah, when I really like a show, I actually end up taking more time to watch it because I want to sit down with it. Like I haven't finished watching Better Call Saul, because like I know I want to spend some time with those last few episodes, and as opposed to just leaving it on while I'm working. So, yeah, I think people will figure it out. They kind of have to, but we'll see what happens. I know Paper Girls is being shopped around, and maybe we'll see a different version of it someplace else in the future. I don't know. Um, I feel very lucky. We got to tell our story over 30 comics, um, and it's cool to see the show bring that story, or a version of that story, to a new audience. Who will then maybe also embrace something else in the future.
Yeah, when we were recording our episode, like we were telling everybody like still like go watch it even though it's been canceled. Go
Yeah.
watch it. Like let people see, like these executives or whoever be like, hey, like people are still interested in this. Because yeah, we're hoping to see something continue on with it. What do you think? Like, and this is something we've talked about a lot amongst ourselves on the show. Like, what's the consumer like role in like helping this, or like is it so out of our power because these corporations are so huge? Like, what do you, as a creator, from like where you sit at the table, like what's your perspective?
I wish I knew. So much of it is a black box, like they they have all the data. We don't see any of it. So I don't know what difference anything makes anymore. So but I think the critical reception of it, and the audience reception of it, it's more than I could have asked for. I think you know in in any situation, whatever I do, I never think like that we're gonna get the biggest possible audience, but I want the people who do watch it to really love it, or the people who do read my comics to really embrace them. And that's more meaningful to me than having, say, like a huge, widespread, fandom,
Yeah, that has to feel special. Yeah, even just with like checking out your work for the first time, like for fun, I like to do a lot of photography, and I've actually used panels of yours from Paper Girls for like mood boards before, and it's like that's never something I would have ever thought of in my realm before, was using a comic strip for inspiration for something that isn't comic related. But that I never knew that. I never thought of that until I started reading issues, and I hope there's other people out there like me who have maybe seen the show and have been inspired just to like check out your other work, or like dive into comics for the first time. And I still feel like we're at like a unique place where like comics feel bigger than everything. Like they feel like they're like the biggest thing ever right now, but they also feel um, I don't know. I'm just curious. I'm curious where the direction of comics are going to go in the next couple of years.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is a big question. I think, I mean, there are a lot of people reading comics, a lot of people reading comics and manga. I don't really like to separate the two because I think, as some of those, like I see, like my son is 10 years old and he reads a ton of like YA graphic novels and he likes reading manga, and as kids his generation grow up reading more manga, and like they'll break away from that too and start reading, kind of Western comics as well. Like it just broadens the types of stories that we can tell in comics. Like he likes superheroes, but like he's not exclusively, into that. And then you see, certain manga and anime that are kind of take some of those tropes and rework them too. Everything is fair game now, where but 20 years ago didn't feel like that. Felt like if you were going to work in comics, it had to be either super indie art comics or hardcore superhero stuff. And now it's like there's everything.
Well, I feel like you're in a unique position too, where like, do you feel like 20 years ago you could have done something similar to what you're doing with one of your recent readings, which is Catwoman, Lonely City? Like how it, I feel like it feels rare that you see someone who's virtually done everything for like a mainstream title, and it's like, is that DC just allowing more freedom now, or is that like you getting more freedom?
It's a lot of that. Definitely DC, creating Black Label to do stuff like that, to do more books like that. The idea being that you could have you could take some of the DC superhero stuff and pitch it towards a wider audience, and a more adult audience, and then give creators as much latitude as they need to tell their story. So just on in terms of subject matter, I don't know if this is a story that I would have been able to do 20 years ago, if the company would have been okay with it. And then on a craft level, for sure, it's taken me 20 years to get to the point where I feel comfortable trying on all these different hats, and putting it all together. You know, I I always loved comics from a single creator. Frank Miller, Paul Pope, and David Mazzucchelli. Just those kinds of comics feel different. Especially when they're from like a mainstream. They're coming from a mainstream publisher too. There's a weird kind of synergy of all, like just you really feel the author in all of it, and I think that's really special, and that's something I wanted to try my hand at, and it took me a long time to come around, and frankly it wasn't something that I was pushing for myself, but the Black Label editors came to me and asked me if I wanted to write something, if I had ever considered that, and as much as I would have liked to, I think I was too scared of creatively of what that would mean, and it took someone else saying, hey, why don't you try this, for me to actually give it a shot.
I love that. Yeah, I love that you got like an encouraging hand in this, because
Yeah.
that does sound scary. Like I can't imagine
Right, and that's what editorial's
doing that.
for, like they're there like as this great, support structure, this net to catch you, and they've been great. My editor on Catwoman Lonely City is Chris Conroy, and the associate editor is Andrea Shea, and they are so good at, giving you the space to do things, but then also being really good about like, finding certain details that maybe you didn't think of, and then tracking changes. Like there's all sorts of kind of logistical things that you need to, that need to be taken care of, and it's really hard when you're, um, for me, like doing all the different parts of the book, like to keep all that stuff in my head. It was very important to be able to count on, my editorial partners here, to catch me when I screw up.
Shout out to the editorial team.
Yeah, I'm glad you gave him you name dropped, because I was about to ask like who was backing you up on this. Lonely City has been one of my favorite things to read since it's been coming out, and like that's not just me like talking it up. This style of story where it's like an Elseworlds. For those who don't know, Lonely City is an Elseworld story where Batman has died and Catwoman ended up going to jail. She's out of jail, older, and trying to like figure out her life. Don't want to go too much into spoiler territory because I want people to check it out. But this style of storytelling, like these Elseworld stories, is actually like what got me back into comics, reading comics as an adult. During the pandemic, everything was shut down, but I would go to my LCS when he was open, and stuff like I was reading Deceased or Injustice. Just examining something with it. They're not all this continuity. Like there's a new set of rules that creators can play with.
Yeah.
Helped me to get back into it, and it's been so cool to explore that. Like, what's is there anything like editorial was like? I don't know if you should do that.
There were things that maybe they steered me away from, but that are still in there, but I think that's the strength of Black Label too, is that it's not specifically continuity. What I wanted to do was have something that was outside of continuity, but then didn't, that also kind of embraced a lot of the publishing history of the characters. And in doing so, um, bring a sense of history and like experience and age to the characters. It's funny. I've heard a few times people talking about the book as like a future story, but you read this, there's nothing future about it. Like, you don't see flying cars. The city is a normal city with like normal buildings and stuff like that. There's no tech in here that is, outside of a normal, comic, that's supposed to take place now. What it is like an alternate present for these characters where they have aged through the years. If I'm gonna get nerdy for a second, I would say I actually had a timeline where, okay, Batman Year One comes out, what, 86, 87 or something like that, and technically Batman's supposed to be like 25, when he's at that age, and then so by the time it's 2010, he's like 45 ish, um,
It's 87. You just confirmed it.
right,
Yeah.
87. Okay, so yeah, so he's like, 40. I can't do math right now, but
It's been a while.
yeah, and so roughly 2010 is when Fool's Night is supposed to occur, and then and then Selena goes to jail for 10 years, and she comes out and she's 55. So like there's like a weird timeline there that actually kind of, dates back to, I guess, Crisis or whatever, and that trying to just, treat it like all the stuff that's happened in those years that was published in those years actually happened to those characters, Um, so yeah, so it's not really a future story, but it's trying to embrace all of it, all of the continuity as much as you can. Sort of like the way I think Grant Morrison was doing with Batman Inc. Trying to just see like all the crazy Batman stories that have happened over the years and treating them like they were actual events and not contradictory.
So in Lonely City, you've created this world that it feels lived in. Like it feels like stuff has happened. Those events have happened, and it's a limited series, but you've still been able to use that space to make something that feels real. Like how do you go about doing that?
I think doing all the different parts of the book, from writing, drawing, and lettering and coloring, like it gives a lot of you have a lot of control from panel to panel. Maybe like it's kind of too much power at sometimes, but and it's part of what contributed to me taking so long to finish the book. Every panel has like a couple things going on in it, and it might not be like the kind of the most important thing that you need to follow the story, but if you come back and read it later, then maybe you'll see that there's something that that pays off later. So each panel has a lot of like weight, is carrying a lot of weight, and I think that's part of what makes it feel rich, is that there's stuff that's there that isn't noted or isn't meant to be commented on by other characters and stuff like that. It's just it's there for the reader and there to give them a sense of life beyond what's happening in that panel or in the story. And one of my pet peeves, I think, is Gotham, as stylish, as stylized as it usually is, it never really feels like a city to me. And Gotham being kind of a weird kind of version of New York. Like I wanted it to feel like a real city with real people in it, with with a diverse population, with all the problems that modern cities have. And this is a world where Batman, the Joker, and Commissioner Gordon are dead. So and so what happens to that city? Like when you take, say, all the kind of superhuman crime out of it, then maybe it becomes more like New York, and then the crime is still, the corruption within the city, and to get that to feel real, and it means treating Gotham like a character, and trying to figure out where Gotham is 10 years after Batman has died too.
I feel like all of the background adds almost like a sense of charm to all of the chaos that's happening. I even just like I loved just like the first panel that I saw, Killer Croc. I was like, I feel like this is just like this could just be kind of like the angry guy I run into on the train at some point, and it showed me that without even reading anything. Like it was just how everything was illustrated, and I love that I love that compared to a lot of comics that I read, it made me feel a little more like I was a part of this world instead of just viewing it from the outside.
Yeah, I really, it's important to me in the storytelling to really bring the reader along, and to give them credit for figuring things out too, like not spoon feeding, to the reader, and let them just experience it, and I think by the end of the first issue, there's a trust established with the reader that I'm not going to just drop you into something without giving you enough context, but I also don't want to just explain everything, right off the bat. That's part of kind of the dance of, between the reader and the author, to kind of bring you through the story in a way that's interesting. And that doesn't mean laying everything out, from A to Z, sequentially. Sometimes it means messing around with things and revealing things later, or what something means, when it's important for the reader to know it and not before. So a lot of it feels like learning how to tell a joke. There's setup, and then and you're bringing details into it, and then you have to pay off. So that was definitely one of the trickier things about writing something longer. I felt like I could handle, maybe 8 pages of something, or could write a scene, but then that kind of structure, and bringing someone through a narrative over 200 pages was a much bigger undertaking, and kind of nerve wracking at points. But I really welcome the challenge of it. It's it it really, doing everything on Catwoman Lonely City has definitely reignited like my love for comics on a creative level, and uh, and also kind of showed me what, they're capable of so much, and so I, hopefully I'll get to keep exploring that.
Was there anything that you felt burnt out from creating within comics?
Uh, sure. Yeah, definitely. There's a certain amount of, I think, because of the way I was doing Catwoman Lonely City, it's very much a love letter to like late 80s DC Comics, when they were starting to dip their toe into mature readers stuff, not just like the big ones like Dark Knight and Watchmen and stuff like that, but like, books like Vigilante and Checkmate and Suicide Squad, and like there are all these kinds of things that are on the edges and that meant for an older audience, and how, with all these stories, like there's a certain amount of like density, because you can just rely on the reader to be, um, to come along with you, so that was one of the things that, I think I felt really I wanted to honor, with the book. So, there's just a lot in there, and the way I chose to draw it was also kind of more work intensive than I might want to do in the future. But I'm proud of how it turned out, and I don't think I would change anything about it. But it does make me, wonder. Does make me think, how do I want to do it in the future? So those are big questions. Those are questions I'm eager to tackle. But I guess whatever the next thing is won't be exactly like Lonely City.
Yeah, it's clear, like hearing you talk about it, that you've taken seriously the relationship between reader and creator, where there's like this give and take on both sides, and like there's a lot of intentionality behind what you've put into it, so that the reader can immerse themselves in this world that you're making. And to me, like it feels relatable, and I wonder, like, is it like, do you draw from experience? Like, has that, like, would this story have been different 20 years ago compared to like what it is now? Because to me, it's like I'm a little bit older than when I read comics as a kid, so I'm like, I get that, like being tired, your body's a little bit more worn, like you're trying to figure things out, and like remembering the old days. Like, did that play any kind of role of like looking back on your
Yeah,
life into this?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dark Knight Returns was written, when Frank Miller was like, in his mid 30s or 30 or something like that, right? I mean, and me, I'm in my late 40s now, and like, being 30 is like, feels in some ways almost like a lifetime ago. And so, but that book is not, Dark Knight is not about getting old. It's sort of about the inevitable clash of two different, systems of thought, and but Lonely City is very much about like what happens when you're older. What happens when the things that you've been doing all your life, um, when the world changes around you, and you're told that you can't do them anymore. So definitely a rumination on how life has changed for us, how and getting older, and what your purpose is. And so no, I definitely would not have been able to do this story 20 years ago. I think the things that make it resonant are things that it wasn't. They weren't things that I was thinking about 20 years ago.
That's awesome. Like, I love to like hear creators like putting their own experience into something, and being able to recognize like what I wrote 10 years ago is totally different from what I'm going to write now. At the time of us recording right now, the last issue has not come out yet. It comes out next week. So we're kind of in the past, the future when this comes out.
Future
But
past.
but the hardcover, the collected edition, will come out. I believe what I saw was December 13th.
Yeah.
Okay, I saw there's two covers. There's the main cover and the DM cover. I believe you did both of those covers,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I've never been in the position to ask this. Which one should I be picking up?
Which one should I
Uh,
be picking up?
yeah. I mean, I would say, yeah, pick up the direct market variant. It's because they do cool stuff with it. I mean, they all have a dust jacket, right? But then the direct market one is actually like a fold out poster. So there's some cool extras in there. So I would definitely pick that up if you can.
Very cool. Thanks. Yeah.
The guts are the
Uh,
same.
I'm gonna
okay.
keep an eye out on my local shop and hope I can find that one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll be ordering it for my shop for sure. Been loving it. It'd be nice to have that up on the bookshelf too. Um, Before we wrap up, another question I want to ask you, as someone who's been working in this industry for a while now, what's some advice you would give to aspiring comic creators, like things you wish you would have known, or things you would have changed?
Yeah, that is always a tough question. I think, and I think it only gets tougher because the landscape has changed so much, and there's a way in which I'm not even sure what would be good advice. But I mean, what has changed between when I broke in and what I see happening today is that there are just so many more venues to showcase your work. For me, it felt like I was either going to be at one of the big publishers, or working on like super small like indie comics, and you kind of had to make a choice. Was I going to do, you know, like some cool, uh, more arty books at like Drawn and Quarterly or Fantagraphics or something like that, or was I going to try and do Marvel and DC stuff or Dark Horse, um, and that, those things still exist, but they don't feel like the only avenue anymore. Now there's webtoons. Now there's, just doing your own web comics and putting stuff out there. You could even format your comic for Instagram, and, just there's different ways of making work and then putting it up somewhere so that other people can read it. And I think that's really great. It's, and then there's all like these, publishers doing graphic novels now, like, regular book publishers doing graphic novels. So there's a lot of opportunity. Um, so, you know, often when people, have asked me this, I feel like they're asking, specifically, how did you break into comics, and what's the secret? And there isn't really a secret. The thing I would say that has carried through throughout the years, when I see people breaking in, is that a certain amount of persistence. You have to really make sure that you keep working, that you finish stuff. That because it's only when something's finished that you're going to be able to put it up. So for other people to read. But if you're constantly just doing sample pages or whatever, you don't really have a body of work to point to. When someone, and you really want to give someone a sense of like what your storytelling is like and who you are as a creator. So doing, some shorts and meeting up with like-minded creators. So I think finding like a group of peers is even more important than it was before. But for a bunch of reasons. One is, your peers are the ones who are going to keep you honest. You can try and like, climb a social ladder, I guess, but like, talking with people whose work you really like, it's very rare that you're going to enter into any kind of meaningful relationship with that person. But the people that you're coming up with is like your support group. Like those are the people who are going to encourage you. Those are the people who are going to check you when you're doing something, that's off. They're going to, be able to, recommend you for jobs too. And, those, when I think about like my friends and in comics, um, those relationships are some of the most, or probably the most important, because they keep you going, and they keep you honest with the work. You can't really, you know, fake it. And it's so, and it's through them that you meet other people too, who are equally, dedicated, and you meet other artists, and it can't always be about looking for a job. I think it is about making sure you have a community around you, that you can lean on, and that you can offer support to as well. Because at some point people are going to start, getting more of their work out there, and then they end up becoming, the creators, the bigger name creators. So I think, and having seen it from some of my friends who are younger, and like, and their networks, I think that's probably the most important thing, is just making sure you have other, creators that you like and respect, and that you can talk with, and be real with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it feels.
I'm glad to like hear that you have that community, that establish, network around you. And it's cool to hear that like everyone needs that. And it seems like it's what helps you to keep going, like on the straight and narrow, for lack of a better word. Like what's up? What's next for you? Like now that Lonely City it has wrapped up, like is there anything you can tell us about that's coming out in the future? Are you taking a little bit of a break? What's next for you?
I think that's
I
one
would
thing we
love
don't
to
talk
tell
about
you.
is the breaks.
Right.
Yeah.
I would love to tell you if, because it would mean I'd figured it out, and I haven't. I'm going to take some time off, you know, I guess towards the end of the year, just to kind of catch my breath and regroup creatively. I mentioned I might want to try doing things a little differently in the next go around. After 200 pages, I'm kind of just sick of the way I'm drawing right now. So like trying to figure out what's the next look. It's not like Catwoman looks that different from Paper Girls, but I think it feels different, and so there's like a different focus, and I got to find like a new inspiration and a new way of, you know, um, tackling it, and maybe figure out some other, just even just nerdy art stuff and learn how to maybe paint a little bit or something, just figure out what is going to be, you know, um, what's going to shake things up enough for me to really dive back in and kind of devote myself to it the way it needs to be done.
Yeah, I feel like that's really important, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about in any creative industry, is not only how important it is for rest, but how important it is to, like, look at different avenues outside of the type of work that you create. And I'm really excited to see what that is, what the next thing is. I feel like, especially, we talk about this a lot with like social media, you have this pressure to constantly be like putting something online, but it's like sometimes it's worth the wait to, you think of like traditional like album releases, and sometimes bands would go like 3, 4, 5, 10 years, between releases. And now you're like pressured to like release something every other week. And it's like, I'd personally rather wait until you feel refreshed and enjoy creating whatever the next project is.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think in making this, I realize how many different ways of making comics there are. Like they don't need to all feel the same. And this was definitely a small batch, kind of distilled. It's like aged whiskey. Whereas it doesn't have to be that. It can be, a nice, craft brew, kind of thing. And like it was so considered and it took time, and it needed that time for it to work. But you could also go fast and run and gun and just make it kind of like a punk rock thing, like so. There's room for all different kinds of comics, and certainly, yeah, I don't think the next thing I do is going to be this like Lonely City, but I think there's other ways to do it that are equally interesting and worth trying out.
Yeah, totally. And we love hearing that. We love like hearing you talk a little bit about past comics and Lonely City, which like people should definitely check out. Even if you're not into superhero comics, I feel like it feels like a very special run on Catwoman. And for any of our readers who jumped in late and for some reason missed the title, we've got Cliff Chiang on here. We've got Catwoman, Lonely City. We've got lots of good stuff coming out soon. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I feel like it felt special just learning more about what it takes to create art in the modern day age.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for having me on. It was really a pleasure to talk with you guys about this.
Well, thank you, Cliff. Thank you, guys. This has been the end of our show. If you liked what you heard, please follow us on all our social medias. We are on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we are on YouTube. You can listen to us on Stitcher, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and of course Spotify. You can also follow Cliff. On this video's post, you'll see Cliff's socials linked. And yes, thank you guys, and we'll see you guys next time. The Bandwagon Fan Podcast is hosted by Josh Jimenez, Alex Malgosa, and me, AJ Soy. Our show is produced by Kate Smith and edited by your boy, AJ. Our social media is managed by Natalia Kokulia, and our theme song, Lush Waves, is provided to us by Taylor Lewin of _audio. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.